Hi, it's Kate Taylor from the Nocturnal. Only 6% of the population was eligible to vote when the Constitution was written. While that percentage has grown much larger since the late 1700s, securing the rights for every American to vote has been a long battle that still persists. Barriers have both explicitly and covertly denied cultural and social demographics access to the electoral process. With the help of activists, historians, and law experts, Amazon Studios rolls out a new voting rights documentary in the midst of candidates' campaigns for the 2020 election, including the presidential race. It is called All In, the Fight for Democracy. Representatives from both sides have linked to analyze a matter in American history that is brought to screens by directors Lisa Cortes and Liz Garbus. The two filmmakers are here with me now. So, first off, your film has so much American history in it that isn't taught in textbooks. So, how does that make you feel that viewers are going to be hearing about important terms about our Constitution, about our history for the first time through your film?
Well, Gage, I think we're at an important time as Americans where we are trying to make sense as to how did we arrive at this moment. And, what we see is that the past is prologue and that the foundation of this country has led in many ways to this moment now. And so I think when we're able to look at the intersection of this time and the long arc of our history, it makes history fun and it makes it relevant to the time.
And then in researching for this, what surprised you? What is something that you didn't know that you found out just by working on this documentary?
Oh, well, I think for a lot of, white folks, white privilege, part of it means you go up, you show up, you vote, and you're back in 10 minutes, right? And I think, a lot of people hear about voting, about long lines, but, or they don't understand the systemic reasons behind it. We don't understand the hundreds of years of history that have produced this crisis. And that is what is so important. So when you show up, you don't think, oh, I must have done something wrong. I didn't return some postcard they're saying I should have done, or something like this, that you see that it's part of the plan. And I think in giving you that history and that knowledge, it will give you that righteous ownership of your voice and that vote. And that you will have to, I'm sorry, these lines should not be that long, but we do want everyone to stay on those lines and know their rights.
A key narrative in the documentary features Stacey Abrams, the Democratic nominee who ran against Brian Kemp in 2018 for governor of Georgia. It was reported in Georgia that voters were experiencing misleading polling procedures, a decrease in polling stations, and crowded lines. This election was not unlike the 2016 and 2012 presidential elections, where increased states' voting limitations and the purging of voting registration came under scrutiny. And then something that stood out was the fact that Stacey Abrams was able to recall conversations she had with her older family members about their experiences. Have you personally gotten the chance to do that with your family members? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think part of for Liz and I, both of our families have had very interesting histories and engagement with protests and social change. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who was very involved in the civil rights movement. And so in many ways, this is kind of like my love letter to him and to my family, whose shoulders I truly stand upon.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, this upcoming presidential election has its own voting challenges. For the primaries alone, in-person voters traveled and waited for hours just to vote. Those who mailed in their ballots were not sure whether their votes actually counted. For Americans who aren't considering voting, what advice do you have for them? Like, what would you say to them having worked on this film?
Well, I'll say something, and then I hope Lisa will chime in as well. I mean, I think that one election will not change everything, right? People may look around and they think, they're not happy with what they're seeing in their communities. And no, well, this one vote won't change everything, but it is the gateway towards changing to a more inclusive society. If large swaths of people aren't voting, if they're not around and if they're not involved, then their communities will not be represented. They may not have clean water. They may not have health care. They may not have protective equipment. Communities need to be counted in order for them to get attention. So I will say, yes, this one vote isn't going to change your world. We'll still have the same problems, but it is the gateway towards making a more inclusive society where every society's needs are part of the national conversation.
In keeping, we have seen over the last couple of months the great turnout across the country, where people are protesting in the streets, but we can also protest at the ballot box and participate. If we are looking for change, we are a part of that catalyst.
Right now, this documentary is a needed awakening that the battle is far from over. All In, The Fight for Democracy comes to Amazon on September 18th, 2020.